Hello, I hope you all are well in these times of pandemic. From the Association and All for the Study of High Capacities and Gifted People, we welcome you to this activity in the frame of the second series of international conferences, Positive Synergies on High Abilities and Giftedness in times of crisis. This year, specifically talking about non identification and its consequences, or when just doing an identification as a label. I am María Dolores Palacio Ornia, and today my pleasure is to introduce you to Daniel López García with a topic called Flexibility in Times of COVID. The idea to sharing this model that involves the adaptation of the individual to the system and not the system to the individual. He's a general health psychologist specialized in clinical psychology, working psychology, specialized psychologist in depression, anxiety, etc. He has a wide training and experience that you will be able to read in his biography. He has trained himself implementing different therapies and giving tools. He dynamizes groups, he's a speaker, he's got some amazing conferences like attitude or around attitude, and he's also a writer. I like that one. He also works in the Clinic Dialogar, and he collaborates with different associations and NGO, Asperger Association in Asturias or in the Telephone for Hope, as coordinator and dynamizer of the depression group. See, he has been doing this since the year 2009. He has been very much acknowledged by everyone for the benefits he brings to the associations. From the Associación Eno, we thank him very much, his help. And Danielle, the floor is yours. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, first of all, to Enol Association, the fact that they have asked me to take part in this Congress. Associación Enol in general and Andrés Palacio in particular, because I can share this time with you. I can share my knowledge, my time, connected to gifted kids. The title would be The Flexibility in COVID Times, and it deals a bit about seeing a bit different what gifted kids are, gifted people are. I'll try to share with you the idea that society, education, has to take the role, a proximity role to these people, and not see them just as a peculiarity, as some elements that are some weird elements in our society. For my presentation, I will share a PowerPoint with you where I will be able to do a bit of a follow-up of the presentation. I share this image with you that says, I think it's a cartoon that it sums up the situation of gifted people. Our educational system that we currently have, somehow, one way or another, we try to find equality, but it's not equal. We see the Gauss bell that we will see that it sets great limitations when we're facing the two extremes, two sides. Standardization is the process of adjusting or adapting characteristics into a product or service or procedure with the only objective that these are more assembled to a type, to a model. This has a root in normalization that started in Santander when at the beginning of the 20th century, and the fire trucks around the place, around the city, they went to help them, and we realized, and they found that the nozzles that connected the fire hydrants to the fire hoses, they were different around the region, and they couldn't help. So they thought, okay, it's important to create a normalization, a norm. So it would become a definition of normalization is to adjust something to a norm, or to make normal something that wasn't initially. So what we're trying to do is an element, taking an individual, to adapt it to the block, to the group. There's a Gauss bell. This sets these situations in which what we see that is what's in the center, it's a normal. But is there life to the east of this bell? Because we see a set of people to this side that from the side of point, the intellectual side of point, emotional side of point. So from a learning point of view, they're within the bell, of course. And there is a life, but its characteristic is, for example, a high emotional intensity. To the east, to the right of this bell, we find some people that have an emotional intensity, an outstanding emotional intensity. They have a higher, also a higher empathy capacity. This doesn't happen in other situations, but for example, with TEA students or kids, they have a difficulty. Some disorders place a difficulty with empathy, but in this case, we find kids or people with an outstanding empathy and a very high sensitivity. Because in many cases, what we see, bullying situations to these kids, and the sensitivity they show leads them to isolate themselves, to get away. And they live a very lonely academic life. And it does pay, they do pay a toll, emotional toll for this, and especially a personal toll. There's a high capacity for self-criticism, so it's quite a bit of a paradox, but their self-esteem goes down. They have very low self-esteem, especially because they're very critical with themselves. They always find the highest reference parameter for themselves than for the rest. So they're in a constant suffering situation. And here comes the word perfectionism that is key to all of this. Gifted people have an amazing perfectionism capacity. And this is probably, let's say, characteristics that support, that leads to anxiety. And why is this so? Because we're moving ourselves in a utopia. Perfection does not exist from that point. From the moment we assume that perfection does exist, we're constantly fighting against this utopia, something that we will never reach. And when we're almost there, we're not satisfied. And lack of satisfaction due to self-criticism, I connect it to myself. And my conclusion is that I can't reach that perfectionist because I didn't do my best or because I'm not the best as good as I should be. And that's a vicious circle that makes this perfectionism go against people. Low self-esteem is also a very important characteristic in this type of people. And why is this so? Well, because I was already mentioning that perfectionism that we're looking for, that we're aiming at, that formula of trying to reach that point of satisfying all my expectations is impossible to reach because of that self-criticism and because of that low self-esteem that accompanies everything. The goals seem to be too much and they need to abandon them because they keep telling themselves that they can't do it. The thought, the tree-shaped thought, as you can well know, they connect thoughts one with the other, another. So we find people that they have many thoughts in their minds, lots of different situations that sometimes they make them collapse. And as a consequence, they work under that parameter of low self-esteem. They don't reach the parameters they want. They live in a universe in which, unfortunately, self-criticism, low self-esteem, and all these thoughts that need to be released makes everything harder. This high empathy also involves a high emotional intensity. What has been lived at the east of the bell is very intensely lived. It's lived in a much higher way than the rest of the people. They are very emotional people, very loved people. They love very much. That's very characteristic too. So the question we get is, where do we place these people who are out of the central area of that bell? Well, there. They are defined within that bell. And our obligation as a society, as an educational system, is to take these people into account, because they are on one side of the bell, but they are still there. And what label shall we give to them? Because we know that we need labels. We need to label everything, to label everyone. Is our surname somehow? Well, we have different labels that we can see here. We can call them all these. How do we want to call them? How should we call them? But it's not just the label, but we start thinking, is a gifted person born? Is it made? Is it genetics? Is it the environment? Is it the interaction? There is, in my opinion, a genetic side, an environmental side that pulls that person. We were talking about closed development area. When the gifted student or the gifted kid is in a correctly stimulated environment, it will develop more appropriately. Here we can see a cartoon that explains quite well, I would say, what is equality, equity, and what is reality. Very often we're promoting equality when it's not the solution. We should go for equity, where we see the stimulus, the environment, the right settings for the development of that person. And in real terms, it's very difficult. And if we play into equality, this is very difficult to do so, because it does discriminate at some point. If we're feeding them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's it. Is that what we have to do? It's their parents' problem. They should do some research. They should solve their own problems. They have to find their own solutions. Do we look aside, or shall we, as community, try to find that flexibility? Shall we find that place where we have to open the fan, we have to open our range of actions, telling them that taking into account this group of people that are so useful for society, and so they offer such a huge quality of input to society and to our education. Here we have another cartoon where Mafalda asks, "Mom, what is normality?" It's a hiding place for very weird people, is what the mom says. And here we have three types of minds. We have that we will probably get a good idea of the mind of people, in a mind where we will include that group of people who are to the east of the bell. We've got rigid, liquid, and flexible minds. Rigid mind lives in a limbo, comfortable, distorted, highly dangerous, where truth has been kidnapped in the name of something or someone. It's a very stable mind. It's there, it's comfortable, it's very convenient. Because it's a faith issue, and there is a thought, a situation in which this is the way it's always been, so it has to be that. There has to be a reason, no questioning about it. That's it. There's many experiments being done in psychology that talk about this type of mind. There's an experiment in which 3 individuals are taken. One of them is a study element, and the others were like something like a hook. There were 3 lines, A, B, C. A was very small, B was a little bigger, and C was much larger. There was a big difference between B and C. But the 2 hook people, they were saying, when asked which is the longest line, they would say B. 42% of cases of their subject, study object, they would say B was the answer, even though it was clearly C. But they had that rigid mind, and they just couldn't even realize that it was C. Because they probably thought, well, if they say it's B, then it has to be like that. So those reasonings are very rigid. Here we can see a video, what I'm trying to explain to you. Look at this example, please. 5 monkeys in a cage. There's a ladder and some bananas. And when one of them picked the bananas, the rest received a shower. After a while, when a monkey was going to go up the ladder, the rest would prevent it. Nobody wanted to climb that ladder, even though the bananas were tempting. Scientists then changed one of the monkeys, and then another, because the blue one would not climb the ladder. And the new one, again, a fourth, a fifth. So they have new monkeys, a new set of monkeys that never received that shower, but they still would not climb the ladder. If they could ask one of them, why did they why didn't they climb the ladder? And they would say, I don't know. Things have always been done like that. So that was a rigid mind. It's always been done so, and that's why nothing will be changed. Education has always been done so, and we don't have to change anything. And this is a working method in which I believe that we're making huge mistakes because it's always been done so. This rigid mind is also distorted because there's some learning mistakes that are not taken into account at all because we don't stop and think and assess. It's always been like this. Nothing has to be changed. We're not going to touch anything just in case. We might get it wrong. And because these people with this rigid mind and very dogmatic, when they feel trapped, when they see they don't have an argument against a certain statement, they feel angry, they want to impose their meaning, their opinion. What does this rigid mind lead to? Well, low tolerance to frustration. Because we don't understand and we don't want to reason, we don't want to understand any explanation, because any explanation, any situation of this type is going to threaten my thoughts. So I'll just block myself. I won't listen to any kind of an argument or to explanation. But you can't control everything, that's clear. And that would lead to anxiety. And another element would be bad interpersonal relations, because that authoritarianism, that dogmatic behavior, that not arguing, not discussing, there's a starting point that produces rejection. We don't like being with people who say things are like as they are and there's nothing to discuss. And they only see the world in one dimension. This is a typical image that we see, the young lady and the old lady. Many people see the old lady, many people see the young lady. There's two people there, and there's only one dimension. They say, a rigid mindset, there's a young lady, and that's it, no more. Doesn't leave an open door, a possibility that could be another idea, another formula, another person, as it is here, where we see a young person and an old person. Decision making is also blocked, because when things seem to not follow the rigid, stable sequence that we believe in, we're blocked. We don't know what to do, how to go further. Instructions follow a line, follow an order, but if one of the steps shakes, the whole system does. That involves problems at work, sexual difficulties, loving difficulties, because every rigid person is searching for unreachable perfectionism. We don't feel comfortable in any area because there's always in the background this thought that this could be better than it actually is. So that rigid mind works under some very rigid parameters. Of course, there's great fear to make mistakes and to change too. What is the best way to prevent making mistakes? Well, keep your routines, prevent change, and stay as we are. But we're making a big mistake. We're losing the possibility of a very clear perspective, because life is change. If there's anything that can define life, is change. There's constant change, constant evolution. We need to understand the constant frustration of these people, the constant self-esteem problem, lack of control that a rigid mind has to have, because something as natural, as normal as change is happening. Personal growth is also blocked, because if you want to grow, you need to have a set of knowledge. You need to be able to incorporate the circumstances, this knowledge. But if you're in such a locked situation, there is no growth. The other mind is liquid mind, that is non-defined, apathic. There's no personality in this mind. It's very common in many people because, they don't look for problems. They just adapt to whatever situation comes. They have no clear ideas, no commitment, no position, no personal positions. These personal positions adapt and change depending on whom they're talking to. If we were talking to this rigid mind that we were talking about at the beginning, liquid mind is constant change. It has such flexibility that its body changes constantly, depending on the characteristics of the situation and of the environment. It's never set. It's nothing, it just flows. Explores, looks. The problem of flexible mind is the lack of position, of criteria. Liquid mind opens the door wide and it just adapts itself to whatever comes. And what happens? Well, flexible mind leaves the door half open to that possibility that there could be something they can learn. It has something that I might be able to learn from the environment. Flexible mind, as opposed to the liquid and the rigid minds, they can doubt about themselves, even about themselves. They are open to growth, to evolution. They don't go to dogmatic beliefs. There are no strong beliefs or no unmovable beliefs. They have their ideas, they present them, but they can change them if they feel there are reasons for change. And flexible mind takes these situations, learns from them. It's not rigid at all. They are people with a sense of humor, nice people, they're open to learning, there's no fear, no resentfulness, there's not a barrier around them. They don't just accept anything, because their belief is that truth does not exist, not even their own truths, because they're open to other opinions, to discussions, to reasoning, to arguing, and of course to change their own ideas. And I insist very much here because flexible mind is the one that accepts that currently there are people who have some intellectual level, certain, and others 2x. Ones have the x level and other 2x. And they accept both situations. They adapt to both situations, of course. That's the line where you would find no discrimination. Others are respected. And they limit exclusion in all ways. You can have whatever label tagged to you. You can be anything. We have to respect that type of people, those type of minds. For that same reason, a flexible mind, a flexible society has to start from the point that in this system, this educational and working systems, there's room for everyone. With a flexible mind, we don't look for complications. We just have these minds just have a deep thinking mind. What they feel, what they think, they present it in a deep and argumented way. And this obviously clashes with a rigid mind, where authoritarianism and totalitarianism were leading their lives. Things are like this because I say so. But a flexible mind, I think you've understood more or less where the line of my speech goes. Gifted people usually have a flexible mind. People where within this flexibility, what they are looking for is to reason, to discuss, to find the reason for things. Of course, these minds are not perfect, but they do try to get away from that should, that must, those labels that come from the origin, and that they sometimes prevent our personal development. And how can we go to the optimal development if we are not allowed to explore, to find the source, to see where we can grow from, where we can find the greatness of knowledge, with greatness of one of my own ideas? How can I progress if I think that the past is a curse, that we can do nothing against it, that we're tied to our past, to that rigid mind, as if we had a rigid mind, or if it just flows as a liquid mind? The good thing about rigid minds, it has ideas. The negative thing is that it's just tied, entangled in them, and it believes that it cannot change, and it's forever. The positive thing of liquid mind is that there's no barriers to anything, but there's a lack of point of view there. On the other hand, flexible minds have opinions, beliefs, principles. It's willing to change, and it actually assumes and accepts change as part of life. and it's always in contact with reality. Critical thought is the basic line of their decisions. Critical thought, critical thinking, asking themselves why. Why of things, analyzing it, not staying in a situation in which it's always been like that and that'll be it. If we're talking about rigid mind as a dogmatic element, flexible mind is exactly the opposite. Logic, evidence, that is going to set their line and their decision-taking process. Because they they question everything because it's not enough that it has always been done like this. Sometimes we might have to think with other arguments, with other facts. Why does it have to be always this? One example is this person in an airplane, this air hostess, toilet is busy, and the lady is a pregnant lady, needs to go to the toilet. Male toilet is free, and female toilet is busy. The lady asks, "May I go to the toilet, to the male toilet?" "Oh, no way. It's always been done like this. Men go to the back, women go to the front. But really, I need to go to the toilet, and I'm pregnant. No, I'm sorry, it's always been done like this, and we can make no exceptions to this rule." That would be a rigid mind. A flexible one would say, "Come on, please go ahead. Don't you worry. I'll just make sure that no man goes to that toilet while you're in." That would be the big difference between a rigid and a flexible mind. And how would have acted? Well, this is what I just explained. Don't you worry. They just find solutions depending on situations. They adapt to circumstances. They take different situations, ideas, positions that are tailored to the circumstances. No more and no less. Rigid mind is going to be a dogmatic mind. It's always been done like this, and that's it. Another example. This person is in. There's a person with a son that goes into crisis at 12 p.m. and the drug their kid needs is not. They don't have it anymore at home. They have just realized that they don't have it. Pharmacy is closed. The pharmaceutical, the pharmaceutical is closing the pharmacy. Please, my son needs this drug. Please give me. And the attendant says, "No, I'm sorry. It's 12 p.m. It's closed. There's a timetable, and it's closed." But the dad is so upset and then turns around, breaks into the pharmacy and steals the drugs. Up to what point can we get to the dilemma, the philosophical dilemma of a private property, non-authorized stealing of a drug? Of course, you wouldn't do that normally, but a kid passing away because it was a bit late, well, we need to take our own decision. When facing that situation, many of you would be very clear how you would behave. But if we're stuck, if we're rigid on that situation, we would get to situations that can be so flexible that we'll be seeing these situations so often. And flexible minds are going to adapt to these situations. On the other hand, rigid mind is going to follow some rules, situations that cannot be changed at all. Never, ever. It's very important to know that flexibility is not a state of mind. It's a dynamic. It's a way of being. The person comes to the pharmacy, there's a problem, makes an observation, there's an assessment, and due to that self-assessment, there's an action. And there's a hierarchy of priorities. Of course, what they try is to lead to find a road where you can just drive moderately without feeling stuck, without feeling suffocated. And pluralism is probably one of the most basic characteristics of flexible minds. This is a story that gives us an idea of what pluralism is. A man is placing some flowers on his wife's tomb, a burial area, and another person, a Chinese person, is doing the same with a rice bowl. And the white man says, "Well, but do you really think that the person who has passed away will come and eat your rice?" And yeah, sure. At the same time as your relative comes and smells the flowers. My beliefs, my way of working, are compatible with the beliefs of the way of working of other people. When I feel that I have that total truth, the only truth, that flowers are the most appropriate thing we can take to our loved ones who have passed away, and I do not respect that other people have other beliefs, well, these situations may arise. I hope I have been clear enough in my presentation, and I want to thank again the association for this invitation that I received from the Annual Association. Here are my contact details should you need anything else from me. Thank you very much.